These are the most interesting historical photos and unusual objects from the past. Let's get 100,000 subscribers on the channel. In 1923, Germany faced hyperinflation caused by the effects of World War I and reparations payments. The photo shows a Berlin banker counting huge stacks of depreciated stamps, which were stored in bundles due to the loss of face value. J.W. Waldron's Smith & Bicycle Works is a small workshop in Brighton, England, circa 1900. The establishment was engaged in the manufacture and repair of bicycles, including the then popular penny farthings with a huge front wheel. Such workshops have been an important part of the urban fabric, catering to the growing demand for private transportation among the middle class. A German soldier demonstrates a gas mask with a nose clip and mouthpiece, an early model of personal protection against toxic substances from the First World War. Such devices made it possible to filter the air through a carbon or chemical filter, protecting the respiratory tract from chlorine and phosgene, which had been actively used on the fronts since 1915. Centuripe is an ancient city in the province of Enna in Sicily, Italy. From a height, it resembles the figure of a man with outstretched arms and legs. Inhabited since before the Roman era, the city is located on steep hills, which led to the unusual shape of its streets and buildings. This geographical location provided protection and a strategic advantage. A Soviet lieutenant commander stands at the 12.7mm Vickers quadruple anti-aircraft machine gun mounted on the ship. These British systems were supplied to the USSR under Lend-Lease and were used in the naval forces for air defence during the Second World War. The installation could hit air targets at low altitudes and was characterised by a high rate of fire. Early 20th century war photo. A Chinese cavalryman with a horse stands next to a massive stone statue of a camel on the Spirit Road. A ceremonial alley leading to the imperial tombs of the Ming dynasty. Such sculptures symbolically guarded the peace of the deceased and were part of the funeral ritual. A flooded street in the village of New Hinsky, Oxfordshire, 1890. During severe flooding, residents observed the passage of horse-drawn carts through the water level, which has risen almost to the sidewalks. The stage is complemented by a pub sign and the architecture of Victorian England, reflecting the daily life of the rural community of that time. An American football match in the USA, 1965. During the game, the school building located next to the field caught fire. Despite the fire and the active work of firefighters, the match was not interrupted. Hundreds of spectators continued to watch the game, demonstrating the era-typical priority of a sporting event over an emergency situation. Moscow, 1963. A man crosses the street with a teddy bear on a chain. There is a dense stream of Soviet vehicles around, including Ghazi M20 and Zim. Keeping wild animals at home was not regulated by law at that time. The front of Western Europe, December 1914. During the temporary Christmas truce, British and German soldiers organised an unofficial match in no man's land. This was a rare manifestation of humanity during the First World War. USA, Alabama, 1956. An African-American family is served at a separate counter labelled "Coloured" at an ice cream stand. Such segregation was legislated in the southern states and reflected racial inequality in everyday life in the period before the Civil Rights Movement. France, 1944. An American officer and a member of the French resistance hide behind a car during street battles for the liberation of Paris. In the background are members of the militia loyal to the Vichy regime, watching what is happening. The scene is captured in the midst of an operation to expel German troops. May 1945. Allied soldiers study the latest editions of newspapers with headlines about the death of Adolf Hitler. The publication confirms the end of hostilities in Europe and marks the collapse of the Nazi regime. The picture reflects the atmosphere of intense expectation and a historical turning point. The year is 1977. Bill Gates, one of the founders of Microsoft, is lying on a bench in the office and talking on the phone. At that time, The company was just starting work on personal computer software. On the table next to it is a teletype, a symbol of the early digital age. The hospital ward at Leeds General Infirmary, Great Britain, 1895. The spacious room with high ceilings and rows of beds on both sides was used to accommodate patients. Such halls were typical of the Victorian era, when hospitals were beginning to implement hygiene and ventilation standards. Protest against racial integration in Little Rock, Arkansas, 1959. The participants opposed desegregation of schools, initiated after the ruling of the US Supreme Court in Brown v. Board of Education, 1954, which declared segregation unconstitutional. The posters reflect the widespread racist and anti-communist views at that time. A hoard of bronze coins with a square hole, discovered on the territory of an ancient burial site during the Tang dynasty, 618-907 AD, in China. The coins were kept in a clay pit and used as funeral gifts or symbols of wealth for the afterlife. The African American women's softball team called the Owls poses before the match. The picture was taken in the 1930s against the background of a car with a DC license plate during a period of racial segregation when such teams played in independent leagues. 1953, San Pedro, Los Angeles. Cairo Mary, the legendary female bouncer from the Shanghai Reds bar, takes out the troublemaker. She was recognized by the tattoo on her arm and the tough character that became the symbol of the institution. USA, 1939. Norma Jean Baker, the future Marilyn Monroe, at the age of about 13 years. The photo was taken before the start of her modeling and acting career, during the period when she lived in foster care and attended elementary school in Los Angeles. Futuro House is an experimental plastic house designed by Finnish architect Matti Suronen in 1968. The structure was intended as a mobile home for recreation and assembly in hard-to-reach places. Due to the oil crisis and unstable demand, about 60 copies were produced. John Steinbeck's letter to Marilyn Monroe, dated April 28, 1955, is written in a humorous tone. The writer asked the actress to sign a photo for her nephew John Atkinson, who lives in Texas. Steinbeck stresses that the teenager is obsessed with Monroe and adds that her signature will make the boy her slave. The letter reflects Monroe's massive popularity and Steinbeck's literary style. A 1930s advertisement promotes weight gain as a way to become more attractive. The text claims that thinness is dangerous to health and hinders personal happiness. The advertisement offers a special tonic based on brewer's yeast and iron, supposedly adding 5 to 15 pounds in a few weeks. It is reported that doctors have long recommended beer for weight gain in weak, nervous people. The Daily Mirror, on April 4, 1944, published a picture with a caption in the spirit of British humour. And now you are listening to a baby bird who is only 3 hours old and his opinion about the current situation. The frame symbolises a light satire on current events, accompanying a photo of a newborn chick and a microphone pointing at it. Dinner party at the Astor Hotel in New York, 1904. The picture shows a formal reception in a ballroom with sumptuous setting and symmetrical seating arrangements for guests in tuxedos. The Astor Hotel was a symbol of luxury at the beginning of the 20th century and one of the most prestigious places to receive the elite of American society. Pelé has lunch with his parents, 1958. The photo captured the 17-year-old future world champion at a family table in Brazil, shortly after he became a national hero at the World Championships in Sweden. The stage symbolises the humble roots of a football player and the importance of family in his life. Pictured is Danish polar explorer Peter Freuchen with his Inuit wife, Navarana Mekupaluk, in 1912. They met during Hans Hedtoft's Arctic expedition. Navarana is originally from Greenland, and her knowledge helped Freuchen survive in the harsh conditions of the Arctic. This union symbolises a rare cultural bridge between Europeans and Inuit people of the early 20th century. The photo shows a Tibetan snow, white yak, an animal with the rarest colouring among all yaks. Such individuals make up only about 3% of the population in China and Tibet. The white yak is considered sacred, symbolising purity and spiritual strength, and its wool is highly valued for its thermal insulation properties and is used in traditional textiles. The Thai army used war elephants until the end of the 19th century. The photo shows one of the last recorded military parades involving war elephants, dating back to about 1885. Elephants were used as a means of transportation, a platform for weapons, and as a psychological weapon in battles. Theodore Roosevelt was diagnosed with severe asthma as a child. At the age of 8, a doctor, following the medical ideas of the time, recommended that he smoke cigars as a means to dilate the bronchi. This approach was considered acceptable in the 19th century, despite the lack of evidence-based effectiveness. At the end of the 19th century, opponents of women's emancipation spread the myth of the bicycle face, an allegedly pathological expression with bulging eyes and tense jaw that occurs in women who often ride bicycles. This fear was used as an argument against women's physical activity and independence. The experimental British Great Panjandrum weapon was developed during the Second World War to break through the fortifications of the Atlantic Wall. It consisted of 2 huge wheels with rockets attached and an axle loaded with explosives. The tests failed. The device was unstable, lost control, and threatened its own soldiers. The project was closed. Franklin Delano Roosevelt celebrated his birthday in 1934 with an unusual theme, a toga party hosted at the White House. The guests, including the president himself, were dressed in Roman costumes, and the atmosphere was complemented by decorations and an antique-style cake. This evening has become a symbol of temporary relaxation during the Great Depression. Experiments on the study of extrasensory perception were conducted within the framework of the Stargate program, funded by the US government. The researchers tried to test the presence of telepathy and clairvoyance using cards with Xena symbols. In 1995, the CIA deemed the project ineffective and finally shut it down after 17 years of research and spending over $20 million. Yes, it's a real fact. Ernest Hemingway, a writer and avid fisherman, actually used a Thompson machine gun to drive sharks away from his prey during deep-sea fishing. He believed that sharks spoil the caught fish and spared no effort and weapons to protect the trophy. In the early stages of aviation, especially in the 1920s and 30s, starting the propeller during flight or having to restart the engine manually was not that uncommon. In the image, the pilot literally gets out of the cockpit to start the propeller, a method called manual unwinding, hand propping, which was used before the advent of reliable SI. This photo perfectly demonstrates one of the most ambitious sculpture projects in the history of the United States, the creation of Mount Rushmore in South Dakota. The work was carried out from 1927 to 1941, and about 90% of the rock was removed using dynamite. Only after a rough explosion did the workers manually work the rock with pneumatic jackhammers. The height of each head on the monument is about 18 metres. This rare historical footage demonstrates the early stage of the development of air mail. In 1912, pilots transported mail in bags on biplanes with minimal equipment. The planes were fragile, without a cockpit or instruments, but they could deliver letters many times faster than trains. Such flights were a real challenge, both for technology and for people. This antique armchair from Shakespeare's house was the victim of historical vandalism. During a visit to England in 1786, future US Presidents Thomas Jefferson and John Adams actually broke off a piece of furniture in Shakespeare's house as a souvenir. Such a gesture was then considered an acceptable expression of admiration for a genius. German bicycle troops, 1914. The bicycle was used as a means of mobile transfer of soldiers and supplies on the Western Front. Such units combined the maneuverability of cavalry with low costs and high movement speed. An American soldier and French resistance fighters, 1944. During World War II, the United States actually developed a substance codenamed Who Am I, designed to morally humiliate the enemy. It imitated the extremely unpleasant smell of intestinal gases and was to be used by the partisans to disorganize German soldiers. The United States was indeed developing the so-called flying bomb, the X-ray project, in which hundreds of bats with attached incendiary devices were housed in a case like the one shown. It was believed that they would fly into attics and roofs of Japanese buildings, causing large-scale fires. The project was closed in 1944 after trials. A woman uses depreciated German marks as fuel for a furnace during the hyperinflation of 1923. At that time, money was losing value faster than it could be spent, and it became cheaper to use it for heating than to buy firewood or coal. The picture shows the German U-boat submarine going underwater after damage. During the Second World War, the British really experimented with training seagulls, teaching them to respond to submarine periscopes in order to use the bird's behaviour as a signal of the enemy's presence.